there is significant funding by groups and organizations to push that, including Sharia, into the United States?
Oh, there's no doubt whatsoever. Prince Al-Walid bin Talal from Saudi Arabia, who has spent millions and millions of dollars in funding universities.
The goal is for the Western Hemisphere, for the Western civilization, the United States, and Texas as ground zero, to become Islamic.
They're working toward eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within, and all the non-Muslim apologists for Sharia that we see are indications of how successful that effort has been. This is all about political power. Nihad Awad, in repeated statements speaking about increasing the number of Muslim congressmen.
The hearing opens with a stark warning about the alleged push to introduce Sharia law into the United States, with Texas singled out as ground zero for this influence. The speaker emphasizes the role of significant foreign funding, citing Prince Ali bin Talal of Saudi Arabia, who has reportedly invested millions in U.S. universities. This financial backing is framed as an effort to subtly reshape educational institutions and, ultimately, the broader society to align with Islamic principles. The concern is not merely religious but deeply political, suggesting a strategic attempt to shift the foundation of Western civilization from within. The discussion highlights the influence of non-Muslim apologists for Sharia, indicating that the success of these efforts can be measured by their ability to normalize or overlook a foreign legal and cultural framework that some participants argue is incompatible with the U.S. Constitution.
Ms. Shield, let me ask you a quick question, and just try to go through these pretty quickly, right? Just a few things with respect to Texas, my friend Mr. Gill was just talking about. Is it true that north of Austin, including there's a big center in West Campus, the University of Texas, including other places? In other words, it's not just located just Epic City. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I'm also talked to a number of people, particularly in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, women in particular, who will tell me that there are enclaves and areas throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex where they do not go, where there are women, Texans, who say that because they are in areas that have a high concentration of Muslim men, and because of the nature of what's going on in those areas, that there are now, quote, no-go zones in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I've heard that from multiple people in multiple places throughout that area, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Spencer, and I'd look to you on this question here. I heard my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who were raising objection to legislation that, and a number of bills that some of us introduced, particularly one that I introduced, that was raising the issue of vetting individuals as we're bringing them into the United States for their adherence to Sharia law. That was the idea. The idea is that Sharia law is inconsistent with our values in Western civilization, so we should know if we're bringing people into the country that may want to advance a system of law or systems that are contrary to our laws. Here's my question. In doing so, my colleagues acknowledged and said that that would mean that Muslims generally would be in fear of deportation or inability to be brought into the country. Does that not suggest that there's a recognition that Sharia law is central to most of the Muslim population throughout the world and those that come to the United States?
The testimony transitions to concrete examples within Texas, particularly in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Witnesses describe enclaves where women and non-Muslims reportedly feel unsafe or reluctant to enter due to high concentrations of Muslim populations enforcing their own cultural codes. The term no-go zones is invoked to describe these areas, suggesting a separation from general societal law enforcement. Ms. Shield corroborates these accounts, emphasizing that these zones exist in multiple locations and have been confirmed by several sources. This section also touches on legislative attempts to vet incoming individuals based on adherence to Sharia law, highlighting objections from some lawmakers.
It would seem as if they're aware of that, yes.
And is that true? Is
Yes.
Sharia law central to most Muslims throughout the world?
Absolutely. Sharia is considered divine law, and thus it takes precedence over all other legal systems. In areas of the Muslim world where it is not fully implemented, such as Egypt or Syria, other countries, it still has a tremendous cultural influence, such that elements of it are often enforced by individuals or groups where the government doesn't do so.
And is it not true also that there are some 50-plus countries throughout the world in which Sharia is either entirely the law or central to the law in a mixture of its religious implementation, but also its civil?
Yes, that's right. There are 57 members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, 56 nations, and the Palestinian Authority.
Is it also not true that when we're talking about the advance of the Islam population, or the population of Muslims that adhere to Islam in this country, that it is not also true that there is significant funding by groups and organizations to push that, including Sharia, into the United States?
Oh, there's no doubt whatsoever. You have, for example, Prince Al-Walid bin Talal from Saudi Arabia, who has spent millions and millions of dollars in funding universities such as Georgetown, where they have now the Prince Al-Walid Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding that is designed essentially to whitewash Islam, jihad, and Sharia and present a version of these things that are designed to foster complacency.
The conversation expands to the international sphere, emphasizing Sharia's widespread influence across more than 50 countries. Witnesses note that even in nations where Sharia is not fully implemented, cultural practices derived from it remain influential, often enforced socially, if not legally. The testimony then shifts to domestic funding, citing organizations like CARE and foreign governments, such as Qatar and Saudi Arabia, that allegedly contribute resources to promote Islamic law and understanding in the United States. The narrative stresses that these activities are not purely educational or cultural but are intended to facilitate broader political influence, increasing Muslim representation in Congress and other positions of power. These statements underline the concern that foreign funding and organized advocacy may have long-term implications for American democracy, portraying a concerted effort to embed Sharia and Islamism within the nation's political and legal frameworks.
Also have the government of Qatar doing the same thing on an even larger.
In addition to these countries, in addition to foreign funding, there are organizations such as CARE and other organizations that are designed to implement and advance the existence of Sharia and the advance of Islamism in the United States. Is that true?
Oh, certainly. Omar Ahmed, the co-founder of CARE, has been on record saying the Quran should be the only law of the land. He has denied saying this, but the original reporter stuck by her story. Ibrahim Hooper of CARE, the famous spokesman for the organization, said that he wanted to see the government of the United States become Islamic sometime in the future. And this is something that is clear from all of CARE's actions.
And would it be safe to say that the goal of those organizations, and the Muslim Brotherhood, as my friend Mr. Gill said, also from Texas, that the goal of those organizations in advancing Islamist movement in the United States, that the goal is for the Western hemisphere, for the Western civilization, the United States, and Texas as ground zero, to become Islamic?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. That's very clear from the explanatory memorandum of the Muslim Brotherhood, saying that the goal is that Allah's religion is victorious over other religions. And they're working toward eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within. And all the non-Muslim apologists for Sharia that we see are indications of how successful that effort has been.
One last question. I'm over my time, then I'll recognize the gentlelady from Wyoming. Is that not inherently political?
A critical aspect of the testimony centers on the political dimensions of Sharia. The speakers insist that this is not solely about religious observance, but about exerting political power to influence U.S. institutions. Nihad Awad, executive director of CARE, is cited for advocating increased Muslim representation in Congress, reflecting an ambition to affect legislative outcomes. The testimony stresses the incompatibility of Sharia with the U.S. Constitution, noting fundamental differences, such as the lack of recognition for we the people, the imposition of religious law above secular governance, and legal principles that conflict with due process, civil rights, and protections for women and minorities. The speakers warned that adopting or accommodating Sharia principles could undermine the legal and cultural foundations of American society, framing it as a deliberate effort to replace constitutional norms with a foreign system.
And not just missional. In other words, not just saying, hey, we would like people to know Allah and to know the teachings of Muhammad and Islam, as much as a Christian might want to advance the mission of Christ, but that it is political in ideology and in effect.
There's no doubt whatsoever. This is all about political power. Nihad Awad, the executive director of CARE, has made that quite clear in repeated statements speaking about increasing the number of Muslim congressmen getting Muslim senators, and increasing Muslim political power on that basis.
There's a movement afoot across the United States that seeks to overthrow our legal system and the Constitution to replace it with a foreign legal system that upends our American way of life. It seeks to replace these foundational elements of our constitutional order with Islamic law, known as Sharia. The principles of Sharia are at odds with the Constitution and the laws of the United States. As Sharia fails to include due process, treats non-Muslims as second-class citizens, and prescribes barbaric punishment.
The hearing delves into historical parallels, referencing early U.S. interactions with Islamic states during the Barbary Wars. Figures such as Thomas Jefferson and John Adams confronted Islamic powers in North Africa that threatened American shipping and enslaved sailors, highlighting early awareness of conflicts between Islamic law and Western legal norms. By drawing this historical line, the testimony suggests that the challenge of Sharia is not new but has evolved over centuries. It emphasizes that the enforcement of religious law through coercion or violence mirrors past threats and underscores the need for vigilance. The narrative stresses that the struggle to maintain American constitutional principles is ongoing, linking historical struggles to contemporary concerns about the imposition of Sharia and the potential for foreign legal codes to influence domestic governance.
All the while, polygamy, misguided corporal punishment for perceived violations of Islam, and acts of violence and terrorism on behalf of Sharia are permitted by its adherents. Sharia encourages violence, silences dissent, rejects religious freedom, and subjugates women and children. Let's be clear. This is not about having the freedom of worshiping a religion of one's choosing, such as Islam, but forcing a foreign legal code that is incompatible with our laws and legal system that provides unwanted consequences to the American people. It's everything we've fought against for more than 250 years. Thomas Jefferson recognized this problem at the beginning of the 19th century when he confronted Islamists in the Barbary Wars to keep trade lanes open and end Islamic religious slavery. When envoys and future presidents, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, inquired by what right the Islamic Barbary states preyed upon American shipping, enslaving both crews and passengers, America's two foremost envoys were told by Tripoli's ambassador, quote, "It was written in the Quran that all nations who should, quote, not have acknowledged their authority were sinners, that it was their right and duty to make war upon whoever they could find, and to make slaves of all they could take as prisoners."
Attention turns to contemporary examples, particularly in Texas. The East Plano Islamic Center, EPIC, is highlighted as a proposed 402-acre enclave intended to operate under Sharia law, demonstrating an attempt to create localized Islamic governance within a U.S. state. While the Texas government intervened to prevent this, the case illustrates the perceived threat of organized, community-level implementation of foreign legal codes. Demographic trends are also cited, including a 172% increase in the Muslim population in Texas over 2 decades. Surveys suggesting that a significant portion of respondents support Islam as the national religion heighten concerns about potential shifts away from secular governance. The testimony argues that these trends, combined with foreign funding and political advocacy, represent a coordinated effort to reshape American society in ways that conflict with constitutional principles and historical precedents.
And that every Muslim who should be slain in battle was sure to go to paradise, end quote. While the rest is history, with American Marines victorious on the shores of Tripoli as their anthem rings, the American people, this Congress, must recognize the same issue our founders identified and defeated over 200 years ago. Islamists are forcing their legal code onto non-believers by violence or the threat of it by any means necessary. The same problem of radical Islam enforcing Sharia has reared its head in the 21st century, this time using different tactics to advance it across the United States. Some of you might think of Sharia as a 2010s buzzword. That is wrong. Over the last few years, efforts to impose Sharia on American communities have taken off, and nowhere more than in my home state of Texas. In 2024, members of a Plano mosque sought to create their own 402-acre Islamic enclave governed by Sharia within the state of Texas. It was called the East Plano Islamic Center, or EPIC. And thankfully, after advocacy by many in Texas, the Texas state government has currently stymied it from advancing.
This segment concludes with a forceful call to recognize and respond to the perceived threat. Emphasis is placed on the need to protect constitutional rights, including freedom of religion, women's rights, and the secular character of the nation. The testimony urges Americans not to remain passive as foreign influence, financial investment, and political advocacy converge to advance Sharia law within U.S. institutions. By highlighting past interventions, current demographic shifts, and ongoing legislative efforts, the speakers present a compelling case for vigilance. The narrative frames the discussion as essential for preserving the American way of life, underscoring that the defense of constitutional principles requires awareness, engagement, and proactive measures to prevent the imposition of incompatible legal systems.